Good evening and welcome to another very special episode of Orta Know Better. My name is Luke. I'm joined tonight by Shannon, and from Newells Old Boys English, a very special guest, Jamie. How's things, Jamie?
Great, Luke. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm delighted and honoured to be invited on and looking forward to chatting some more about all things Newells Old Boys.
Great stuff. Yeah, thanks ever so much for agreeing to join us. So first things first, I think, tell us a little bit about who you are. I know you run that fantastic Newells Old Boys account for all those people who can't speak in Spanish. So how did you get involved with Newells? What's the crack?
Yeah, so I got involved with Newells about 5 years ago now. So as people will have been able to tell already, my accent is definitely not Argentine. I'm from the west of Ireland. But about 5-6 years ago, I was living in London, and I must confess to all the Leeds fans listening tonight that I'm a fan of Spurs. I'm a fan of Tottenham, and I'm actually keeping an eye on the score here in the Europa League game as we're recording. But 5-6 years ago, I was living in London, season ticket holder at Spurs, went to every game, followed them home and away, Europe, everything. And of course, at the time, our manager was Marcelo Bielsa, who's a former Newells Old Boys player under Bielsa, won 3 titles as a player with Bielsa. And when Pochettino joined the club, I remember it was coming up to the first North London derby against Arsenal. And I was watching an interview with him on Sky Sports. And the interviewer said, Maurizio, are you ready for the game at the weekend? It's one of the fieriest derbies in Europe. Spurs, Arsenal fans hate each other, clubs hate each other. Are you able to handle the pressure? And his answer was, I've played and scored in the Clásico Rosarino for Newells Old Boys against Rosario Central. He said, that's one of the biggest derbies in the world. He said, if I can score in that, he said, I'm sure I can handle the game at the weekend. So when I heard this, I was like, wow, what is this game? I'd heard of Newells Old Boys, like I knew the Messi connection. I knew who Bielsa was because he was at Bilbao at the time. But what Pochettino said, he just said it with such passion. I was like, wow. So that was early on in Pochettino's tenure at Spurs. He went on to become, for me, the best Spurs manager of the last 30 years. And all Spurs fans, I think, hold him dearly still. But when he said that in that first interview, I just started looking up Newells online, looking at old footage of that Clásico Rosarino game on YouTube, trying to find out more about who the players were and how the club was doing. And I found that because I didn't speak Spanish, I couldn't really do it. I just found it was hard to follow the club day to day. I couldn't really figure out, who the players were or who the manager was at the time. Started watching their games online, like dodgy streams, betting sites, all that kind of crack. And then I kind of had the thought, right, is there an English Twitter account? Is there an English website for Newells that I can follow them? And there wasn't. So I thought, well, I wonder, could I learn more by trying to do this myself? By setting up a Newells English account and watching the games and writing short tweets about what was happening and about the players. So essentially in 2017, I started doing that and had like maybe 500 followers, 600, 700, 800. And then Marcelo Bielsa who's the hero at Newells, named the stadium after him, most successful manager of all time at the club. He became the manager of Leeds. And or even before that, there was speculation that he was going to take over at Leeds. And all of a sudden, there was just thousands of Leeds fans online looking up about Bielsa, who he was and blah, blah, blah. So I just took that opportunity to start tweeting about Bielsa's connection to Newells and how he came from our club and his record. And all of a sudden, I had like 3,000 followers overnight. It's crazy. Like, and ever since then, I guess the accounts just grew and grew. Last year, set up a website, English language website for Newells Old Boys called newellscaraco.com. And in the last 6 months, started selling official shirts through that website. And now we're the official European UK retailer for Newells Old Boys shirts, because previously you couldn't buy them in the UK or in Europe. So I've been out to Rosario. I've watched Newells at the Estadio Marcelo Bielsa. I've made lots of friends in Rosario. I've been over to Ellen Road. I've made lots of friends in Leeds. So it's been a crazy few years, but 100%.
Bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah, whirlwind. And as they say, Newells are known as the lepers. That's the nickname of the club. And they say that the fans are sick with leprosy, and I'm 100% sick with leprosy since I've discovered that club.
Brilliant! What a story! What a story! I mean, just from what you've told me there, I mean, Pochettino, yeah, I agree, fantastic manager. Obviously speaks really highly of Marcelo Bielsa. But from that, just to sort of 3-4 years on to have been to Rosario, to have been to to this love affair with Marcelo Bielsa and Newells is fantastic. I mean, we as Leeds fans know about Bielsa's impact at the club. He's been here sort of a relatively short amount of time, and he's had a real effect on not only Leeds but the city as well, not only the football club. And by the sounds of it, he's pretty much got that sort of following, and he's done that already over in Newells. He's almost got a cult, hasn't he, of people that anything he touches, people become his disciples. Why do you think that is?
I think you're right there. There's a couple of important points. Like, I think if you just take Newells, that club, he's an absolute god. You know, he's a hero. He made Newells the best team in Argentina for the 3 years that he was there. And Newells before that, like, generally a smallish club compared to the big clubs are Boca Juniors, River Plate, the clubs from Buenos Aires. And Bielsa made Newells unbeatable for those 3 years. Like, and he was 35. You know, nobody knew who he was. It was like appointing just a coach that nobody'd ever heard of. And you know, nowadays, if someone in the Premier League did that, or Leeds, I'm sure Leeds have done it over the last few years before Bielsa, because you've had so many managers, it's hard to keep track of them. But you know, usually when a team appoints an unknown manager, the first thing is, that's going to end badly, isn't it? That's not going to work out. But with Bielsa,
had a fair share there, Jamie.
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
tell you, I mean,
we won't go into that. But with Bielsa, it went the opposite way, and you had this unknown manager who played 4 games for Newells in the 70s, suddenly winning 3 league titles, making them the best team in Argentina. And then I guess after Newells, he won a title with Vélez Sarsfield. That was the only other club in Argentina he's managed. So he went in at them and won the title straight away. So they loved him. And then he took over the national team. So at this stage, everyone in Argentina was kind of behind him. They thought, wow, this guy's a brilliant coach. Now, his spell managing Argentina between 98, I think, and 2004, he made some enemies in Argentina then. So there's a lot of people still in Argentina who think that he didn't do well enough with the players he had at Argentina at that time. But I think on the whole, Bielsa has so many supporters in Argentina just because he's such a unique character. His style is so unique, the way he treats his players, the humanity and the morality that he has as well as a person, as a human. We've seen that at Leeds, the way he talks about, you know, the kind of normal man in the street, and about how footballers are no different to people going out working 9-to-5 jobs. So I think he's loved for that. But don't get me wrong, there's still some element of football fans in Argentina who are not Bielsistas, you know, who
really?
Yeah, there is. There's some people who didn't forgive him. He when he was manager of Argentina, they were knocked out in the 2002 World Cup. They were in the same group as England. Remember that game where Pochettino fouled Michael Owen and penalty? So they don't forgive him for that. They think he should have gone to the final and won the World Cup or whatever. And then, of course, there's Rosario Central fans. So the biggest rival of Newells, they hate Bielsa. They hate him because Newells were the best team in Argentina when Bielsa was manager. So every time Newells played Central when Bielsa was manager, we won. And they basically, the manager of Rosario Central at the moment is a player called Kili Gonzalez, and Bielsa coached him for Argentina. And the first thing he said to Bielsa when he's called to the national team is, you know, thanks for giving me a cap for Argentina. Well, I want to let you know that you ruined my childhood, because Kili Gonzalez was a fan of Central.
Right.
And Bielsa's Newells just trashed him in every game. So he has a cult following in Argentina, and so many football fans love him. Fans of River Plate, fans of Boca, even clubs he hasn't been to. But there's, don't get me wrong, there is still some people who don't like Bielsa.
I mean, I find that really, really difficult to comprehend. I mean, he's such a nice, likable guy, and like you say, he's just so modest and genuine. I mean, we've obviously got our fair share in the Premiership and in England of poor pundits that I don't really know much about him, and they'll slag him off as well. But it's probably not to the same standard or level of hate probably as a Rosario fan. But really interesting what you say there about him being the most successful manager, because the stats at Leeds, it may make him already the second. I mean, although he's not won anything as such apart from the promotion last season. In terms of his win percentage, he's the second highest performing manager ever at Leeds. 130 games, 67 wins, 24 losses, and 39 draws. Second only to the legendary Don Revie. So, so yeah, really, really good stuff. Really, really interesting. He's also the only Leeds manager ever to win 7 league games in a row twice. There's no other manager ever done that at Leeds. So just to go back to his cult followings and things, he's almost making himself a god wherever he goes, because he's creating these great runs and these records and these statistics that everybody loves and everybody cares about nowadays. But how can you not love somebody like that? I just don't get it. And he's just wandering around. He's just walking around Weatherby and that. He's always in like the local coffee shop in Costa. That's it. Yeah. It's for, other coffee shops are available.
Bielsa.
Yeah. No, not for Bielsa. You're right. Yeah, but like just strolling up and down the street, people waving at him along the. Is it the A64, Shannon? That road,
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway,
everywhere. You see him everywhere. On a local jog or whatever, hanging about.
And he's always in the Leeds gear. He's never in any. I've never seen him in anything but Leeds
gear. Same grey tracksuit.
Yeah, I'm sure he sleeps in it. In fact, I'm pretty sure he probably shower. He has one for showering, one for sleeping in. I suppose then what I want to transition on to and move on to is more about him and Leeds. Why do you think Leeds has been the longest he's ever been anywhere at a club level, and what similarities have Leeds got that potentially he's got back home? Because there must be something keeping him here. What would you say that was?
I think an important point to make, just kind of touching on your last point, that I mean, it feels like, oh yeah, Bielsa, everywhere he goes, he becomes a hero, but I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think it's all credit to Leeds that the club and the ownership have given Bielsa a degree of freedom that he can thrive. I think he didn't have that at other clubs. I think he went to the likes of Lille in France. He tried to go to Lazio. It lasted 3 days. And the minute the kind of board started getting involved, or they tried to, make him do things he didn't want to do, he was out the door, And I think credit to Leeds that the leadership team there, Radrizzani, Victor Orta, Angus Kinnear, they've allowed him to just do his thing. And they've given him that degree of control to do what he likes with the team. I'm sure he has some influence over recruitment. I mean, in his first season, he basically sold who were considered, Leeds' best players, Kamarouf and Janssen.
And Ronaldo.
And he was allowed to do that. He was allowed to be like, I don't want these guys. Like, go and get a few quid for them. I don't think he has that. He had that at other clubs, and that's why he wasn't as successful at other clubs. I think when he's given the power to be Bielsa being Bielsa, success is a given then, because he's able to have influence over so much elements that all come together to make the team do well and players to improve. So I think that's an important point. I think Leeds as a city then is the second point. I think that if you look at Bielsa's career, he's never gone for the capital city, big teams, Newells from Rosario. It's the third biggest city in Argentina. He went to Marseille in France. Marseille has a rivalry with Paris. I think Bilbao is a similar kind of regional city in Spain. And Leeds is like the anti-London, right? So it's up in the north, and there's kind of the north-south divide. So I think he goes for clubs that are regional cities, and I think they're underdogs. You know, they're cities who have clubs who should be doing better.
Sleeping giants almost.
Sleeping giants, yeah. And he seems to, if you think of Marseille, Bilbao, Leeds, they're one club cities as well. Rosario isn't. Mm-hmm. Rosario is a 2-club city, which is different to what he had at Newells. But he has been attracted to the kind of one club city, regional city, almost like the antidote to the capital city. So, you know, Bielsa was never going to go and manage in London or Paris or Madrid, you know.
Or Manchester.
Yeah. Definitely not Manchester. But I think he's drawn to that. I think he's drawn to the smaller regional city, one club cities that are underdogs, sleeping giants, as you would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he would ever go back to Newells? Would you say? Or do you think go on?
I don't think so. I think I'm against it personally. I don't want him to come back to Newells, because he's given us as much as he can give. He gave Newells everything. So, I mean, he doesn't owe us anything more. He built our training ground and our training hotel. You know, he gave us like $2 million to build it. He doesn't owe Newells anything. So I think if he was to go back to Newells as well, it's almost an opportunity to slightly tarnish his legacy, if that makes sense. If he goes back to Newells and is the coach and we start losing a load of games and like get dragged into a relegation fight, you know, I don't know. They can't really name the stadium again. Take his name off.
Do you think, being such a good coach that he is, though, I mean, we know as Leeds fans that he's still working with, and this is quite disrespectful and it's used quite loosely, a championship squad pretty much.
Sure, yeah.
And he's taken Leeds United to mid-table in the Premier League without that many add-ons. I mean, we've had 4 internationals. We've signed Rafinha, Rodrigo, Llorente and Koch, but they've never been on the field together, those 4. They've been injured all season. So when you look back, the nucleus and the core of the squad is simply the team that got promoted last year, minus Ben White. So I think for you to say if he was to go back, he might tarnish it. I don't think there's any chance of that. I think he could teach school kids to beat Manchester United. I believe in him that much. I honestly do.
No, I think you make a great point there because, you know, the Argentine league is somewhere where the likes of Bielsa will thrive because there isn't the finances to make transfers. You know, they don't sign players from Europe. They don't sign players from abroad. They might sign players from other South American countries, but it's so different to the Premier League or any other European leagues where you can just build your squad, buy in players from different countries. So I think, yeah, you make a good point there. But I think that, I don't know, for me, again, I think Bielsa's already done enough for Newells. I think there's definitely a role for him in retirement, not perhaps as the manager, but director of football or some other role like that. But I also think that he's happy living in Leeds. He's happy living abroad. Like, he hasn't really lived in Argentina for a long, long time now. And economically, it's not the best country to live in. I mean, there's definitely more opportunities abroad. And a lot of people leave Argentina. You know, there's a lot of emigration from there. So I'm sure he'll retire there. But I don't think Bielsa, I'd be very surprised if he ever took another job in Argentina in terms of a managerial job. In fact, I have a feeling Leeds is going to be his last job. How long he stays, I don't know. He could stay another 2, 3, 5 years. I don't know. And, you know, a few months ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, he'll do another season. But he seems to be kind of laying down roots now and saying, you know.
Comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, I want to stay here until I'm kicked out.
Yeah, I think that was going to be something I was going to ask you, actually. Do you think that, I mean, he's obviously loyal to Leeds United. I mean, he's not interested, as you've already mentioned, in these big money moves where he's got a blank checkbook and he can sign any player in the world. I think he's he's more proud of the fact of how he can transition a team into a team that can play football together rather than having, your world class stars and spending £80 million on bloody Harry Maguire or whatever they spent on him. So yeah, no, I think that was going to be the question. And just to sort of like for like the previous thing about Bielsa walking, I just wondered if you knew much about a story about Bielsa when Rosario was in some form of lockdown and he just started wandering up and down the streets trying to get to training. Is that right? Have you heard that story?
It kind of rings a bell, but I'm not quite sure about it. I know
think
when
there was some. I don't know. It obviously wasn't this lockdown, but there was something going on around the city. And I think it was locked down by the government. And he's just strolling down the street with a coffee in his hand, trying to get into the training centre in Newells, apparently. And it's just, as I say, it's a bit of one of those Chinese whisper rumours, I think, that nobody's ever verified or confirmed, but it sounds like he would. Yeah,
there's a few stories like that. There's one where Newells played the Copa Libertadores final in '92. They lost against Sao Paulo. And they arrived, it was a 2-leg game, and the first leg had been in Argentina and the second leg was in Brazil. And I know that the night before the game, they arrived late. It was like dark, and Bielsa was like, right, let's go to the Sao Paulo ground and train. And everybody was like, no, like it's closed, the stadium, you can't go. And he just went mad. And they told him it was shut and that the players had to go to bed. There was going to be no training session. And anyways, an hour or two later, the team were in there. Bielsa broke into the stadium. The team were in there training like 9, 10 o'clock at night. He found a way in. I don't know, did he jump over a gate or, paid someone off? But he found a way in. And that's, brilliant. Bielsa always finds a way. And he definitely, he's such a unique character, and he does things that are kind of seen as strange in football, because a lot of other managers don't do them. And, he's definitely he's a very unique character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and while we're on stories, then everyone's heard it, but I wonder if you could just give us a bit of an overview on what happened with the grenade, if you know it any better than I do, because I've only skimmed across it. So if you just for the listeners and people who maybe haven't heard it, if they haven't, they're probably must have been sleeping in a shed for the last year, but yeah, if you just give us a bit more of an overview.
Yeah, well, the story goes it was actually that Copa Libertadores campaign in '92. So Newells had won the title in '91, qualifying for the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American equivalent of the Champions League. And the first game, they were drawn to play a team called San Lorenzo, who are also from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. And Newells played them in the first game, and Bielsa's Newells lost 6-0. So it was the heaviest defeat of Bielsa's reign so far. It was an absolute disaster. There was so much hype about Newells playing in the Copa Libertadores, and then for the fans to go to the game and they lost 6-0. It's like, what? So people started questioning Bielsa, thinking, what the hell? Like, what's going on here? Has he lost the plot? So a group of fans, they're known as Barra Bravas in Argentina. They're essentially the kind of hooligans or the ultras.
Right. Yeah.
They decided, right, we're going to go to Bielsa's house and ask him what the fuck happened, because we're after losing 6-0. So these lads would be hardy, they'd be tough enough. You wouldn't want to meet a group of Barra Bravas in a dark alley at night, especially not in Rosario. And they called around to Bielsa's house, and he answered and told them to go away and said he's not talking to them. And they were saying, Marcelo, why did you play this player? Why did you play those tactics? We lost 6-0. It's your fault. And he said, go away, close the door. And they didn't go away. They stayed there banging on the door. Bielsa, come out. You have to answer to us. And Bielsa, next time he opened the door, he had a grenade in his hand. And he said, if you don't leave now, I'm going to pull the pin. So the Barra Bravas were like, what the hell? Like, terrified, just ran away. They couldn't believe it, that Bielsa was casually holding a grenade in his house. But what a way to scare them off, They didn't call back to his house after that. But it didn't matter because Newells won every other game, I think, and reached the final of that competition. So he turned things around.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great story, isn't it? I mean, I haven't heard it in that detail, and I've only read bits and pieces about it, but it's a story you told that really, really well. And it's just like it's hard to think how worlds apart something in Argentina to England is. You know, he's the same guy, but if you could imagine that, I forget how old he is now. He's 60,
65.
65, yeah. 65-year-old bloke. You could not imagine him stood there with a bloody hand grenade now. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, fabulous. What a great story. So yeah, you said you've already mentioned the training ground and the hotel and everything that is paid for. Did he do that just out of his love for the club, out of respect? Did he feel he owed the club something? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, exactly. I think the club were looking to upgrade their training facilities. They had just pitches, basically, just a few pitches on a site, and I think there was then plans drawn up to build. So they've built a hotel at the training ground, so the players can sleep in it. And it's they upgraded the pitches. They relayed new grass and things like that. And his sister, I believe, who's an architect, she's also a politician. She designed it, so she did the plans up for the training ground, and then I guess maybe the club figured out it was going to cost $2 million, and no questions asked, Marcelo was like, "Yeah, I'll pay for that." And then they named it after Marcelo Bielsa's mentor, who's a guy called Jorge Grifa. And Grifa is about 86 or 87 now, and he was a player at Newells and then a coach at Newells, and he's basically the one who, taught Marcelo how to be a coach and how to spot youth players and how to scout players. And they were the ones who were going around Argentina in the 80s trying to find players like Pochettino. It was Grifa and Bielsa. So the training ground was named the Jorge Grifa Training Center. Bielsa paid for it all out of his own pocket. So yeah, absolutely amazing contribution to the club, and the facilities are way ahead of their time in Argentina. So we had a new manager join Newells this week, and his first press conference was today, and he came from Atletico Madrid, so he's assistant coach at Atletico Madrid. He's been living in Spain for 10 years, and his first thing he said is like, what Newells have here in terms of the training ground is like what you'd find in Europe. Normally, you'd expect that the facilities in Argentina would be much less, and not as good, really. And he was like, I feel like I'm still in Europe because the facilities are so good. And I guess that's down to Bielsa's investment, really. And because he's coached in Europe and he knows what high-level training facilities look like, he was probably able to tell his sister, this is what you should do, this is how you should design it. So I think it's invaluable to Newells to have that experience and that generosity as well.
Yeah. Do you think he's trying to improve the standard over there by offering a European style training facility? Because I know when he first moved to Leeds, one of his requests was we need a running track and it needs to be open. So I mean, he obviously focuses a lot around fitness and the players be running a lot more than any other team. But do you think he's trying to reinstall that and take that back? He's almost trying to make the Spanish train like they would in Europe with the facilities wise. Do you think he's trying to introduce that? Do you think that's what he's up to?
I think what he's doing is basically he's learned so much over the years. He's so much experience, and he knows the recipe to get players to a certain standard and to improve them. So I think because he feels so ingrained in Newells, that's his club, that he's happy to share that information, and tell Newells this is what you should be doing. I mean, Newells have named the stadium after him, so he's probably looking to give something else back now. So I mean, he always says it is his club is Newells. He was a player, a manager, still supports them. The Bielsa family is ingrained in Newells. So I think it's more a sense of, I have this information and it will improve your club. So why not do it?
Yeah. While you're on that, about the information and having the information, what are your thoughts around and money? In fact, actually, the fact that he paid his own fine for the old Spygate against Derby. obviously, I'm biased, so I would stick by Bielsa and say that he wasn't spying. There was no law in place at the time. He was just doing his research and potentially scouting, as they all do, and as he quite rightly said that they do in South America and in every other European country. But he obviously got quite a hefty fine and got quite a lot of stick actually from the British press for that. But I think the way that he went about it benefited him really well, and I think that's probably why he's come out still sort of. I mean, I don't want to still say smelling the roses, but he's come out with quite well, and he's still well respected within the game because of how he went about that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that was a fascinating incident. I put it this way: one of the reasons I suppose fell in love with Newells and Argentine football really, and still, I watch so much Argentine football. I've been out there is. Football is still pure in Argentina. They've yet to introduce VAR, but it's coming next season, and that's a big negative for me. But
look at you.
Oh, I know, Jesus Christ! But football in England and in Europe has been so sanitized. It's a different game to the game I fell in love with when I was a kid, right? So when I fell in love with Spurs and English football in the early 90s. Football now is so different. There is so much things that have changed for the worse, I think. I have said this before in other podcasts and stuff. I think there's way too much money in the English game. I think that it's wrong that states like Abu Dhabi can just take over Manchester City and bankroll them to a league title, and the same goes for PSG with Qatar. But Argentina doesn't have any of that. The clubs are still owned by the fans. There's no private ownership. The best thing about it is that when you go and watch Newells, you watch a Newells match, most of the players on the pitch are from Rosario, came through the Newells Youth Academy, almost like what Bielsa has tried to do with other clubs, right? So bring youth players through, look to the local talent. He's not interested in buying foreign players in. Argentina still has that pure football, what a lot of people fell in love with. It's kind of romantic in a way. And I think Bielsa is kind of, he has that in him as well. So the whole thing with, there was someone spying on a training session, like in Argentina, big deal, whatever. Like that wouldn't be reported to the league. No way. People would just be like, whatever, that's only a kid. Like, let him spy on us. We're still going to beat them at the weekend. But for the league to open a case against the club and then fine them, it's just like it's another symptom of how football has changed. And it's become so commercially led. It's so rules driven. You can't do this, you can't do that. It's just crazy. And I think Bielsa probably feels that. Unfortunately, he's one of the last managers to actually still hold true those values of pure football, and I think, paying for the fine out of his pocket, that was, I think he thought, well, I'm sorry if I didn't know this wasn't allowed. I did it. Here you go. I'll pay the fine. He's a very humble guy, and he's not flashy whatsoever. Like we all know, I think he drives a Volkswagen or something, and
I don't think I've ever seen him in a car.
No, I think I've just heard that. I'm not sure actually if he drives in England. I don't know, but as Shannon said, he wears the Leeds tracksuit everywhere. Like he's not wearing designer gear or suits around the place. I mean, don't get me wrong, Bielsa's on a huge salary at Leeds, but you wouldn't know, would you? Like he lives in a modest flat in Wetherby.
Go on, sorry.
I just think like he's such a normal, humble guy. I would love to know where his money goes, because he doesn't spend it on flashy gear like our suits. So I think to him paying that fine just seems natural. It's just the kind of guy he is. And I just going back to what I said, I think he's still pining for those true values of football that are still in Argentina in the Premier League. And it goes back to that case of, I don't need to buy players. These English players are great. I'm going to just improve them. I think he's staying true to those values, and that's what, there's nothing better than a local lad. Like, look at Calvin Phillips. He comes from Leeds, and he's like Leeds' homegrown boy. I think that's what we all love in football, and some clubs have lost that completely. Some leagues have lost that completely. So it's people like Bielsa who are still keeping that going, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think by him paying that, it definitely shows his humble side. But I think that's why he's got so many supporters still. I mean, do you think if he does move to another club, do you think those supporters will still follow him despite what club it is? Or do you think, I'm sure, I mean, from seeing how everyone is with him at Leeds, that people will still continue to follow him wherever he goes.
I think so, yeah. I think, I don't want to speak for Leeds fans. You'll know better than me, but I think he's cemented his place in the history of the club already. I think that, even if he was to leave tomorrow, after Don Revie, Bielsa be talked about next probably, so, yeah, I think the relationship between Leeds and Newells has been brilliant. It's been so much fun for me. Just kind of joining the two together, because I've managed to bring some Leeds fans over to Rosario and bring them to a game and things like that. And I've been to Elland Road. So I hope that continues. I'd hate to see that die if Bielsa leaves,
Is that enough for Jamie?
Yeah, it is. No, I've always said that if there's any Leeds fans who want to go to Rosario to a Newells game, just contact me and we'll sort it out.
Shannon, do you fancy it? A bit of a pod outing?
Yeah, a little group trip out. I'll take that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
We'll put it on expenses. The lads don't know. The other lads
so cheap out there. It's so cheap, honestly. The flight is the most expensive thing you'll pay for. It's just, it's really cheap to visit. But no, there's been quite a few Leeds. I think we've brought about 50, I'd say, so far.
Really?
Yeah, there's been quite a few out before the lockdown, obviously. But yeah, been some funny times with Leeds fans in Rosario, but
good.
Yeah, I think
I'll answer that.
Wherever he go next, he'll be followed by Leeds fans. Yeah, for sure.
I'll answer that for you, because I definitely would follow Bielsa's career wherever he went. All right, I'm not going to start supporting the team that he goes to, but I find it weird how now I keep an eye out for Newell's results when they've been playing. Even though I had no idea, I say I didn't have any idea. I know Maradona played there and Messi played there and whatever. But yeah, I didn't really know much about them. And since Bielsa's been here, he's just installed a little bit of probably the best word, the best way of putting it. It's just a little bit of interest, I think, in quite rightly what you say, the grassroots of football and how football should be brought up and how people should play the game. And I think that in itself just speaks absolute volumes, that you can come into a city the size of Leeds and start having, start almost reinstalling that faith and that love for the game that we all had a number of years back before we dropped down a few leagues. But yeah, I mean, there's murals all over the city. I don't know if you've seen any of those, Jamie. There's Bielsa all over. There's songs written about him that some Leeds fans have done. He's really been an absolute breath of fresh air. I've not met him yet, and I'm absolutely gutted because I really want to eat. I mean, I'm going to make sure I meet him. I don't know how, but I'm going to make sure I meet him somehow. Probably just sit in Weatherby Costa when it's up.
Yeah,
just go sit in Weatherby Costa when it's back open from morning till night, supping coffee like that. But yeah, I mean, I know one or two people who have, and they just reiterate. I mean, he doesn't speak great English, but you can still tell what a nice, humble guy he is. Have you met him, Shannon?
I haven't, but my brother has while he was out on a bike ride. He actually had a flat tyre, and Bielsa stopped to speak to him while he had a flat tyre out on his bike ride. And again, it's crazy, the little English he does know, and he's still out there, being just such a lovely guy,
Brilliant. It's brilliant, and I mean the FIFA Fair Play Award for giving that goal against Villa again just highlights and emphasises and cements that he is one of the very few proper football fans out there. He loves the game, doesn't he? He's almost obsessed to a point where he's at every game. He's probably sat in his bedroom now doing something to do with football, and he lives in a little flat, like you say, in Weatherby. He does live in a flat, because I remember seeing when he got big up from Orta
and stuff that people have put up when they were around there. Yeah,
I don't get any hassle though or anything, does he? Like if that was,
I think he did when we first went up to the Prem. I think people were celebrating round where he was, weren't they, for a bit?
Right.
But that's just a certain group of people. But
yeah.
like you say, he's dead casual. I think I've seen people spot him in Leeds train station getting a train, and with his little carrier bag and tracksuit on.
Yeah. Well, I think he probably came out with I don't know, a Yorkshire pudding and threatened to throw it at him if they didn't leave or whatever. Didn't he?
The next best thing to a grenade.
Yeah, but no, I mean, in a nutshell, I mean first of all, thank you, Jamie, for giving us such a great insight into. Well, he will be a club legend if he's not already, Marcelo Bielsa, but also into what you're doing with Newells and stuff as well. And the offer is there if you do want to come over to a game when we're all allowed and stuff. We'll meet up and have a few beers and a Yorkshire pudding and whatever else you want to eat while you're here. Fish and chips must be better here than Ireland, so we'll have fish and chips from Gravely's. But yeah, stay in touch, mate. We're really, really thankful for you coming on. We'll chuck this out and get all the tags in there and things, and promote your website as well for you. So if there's anything else you'd like to add before we do close up, then please feel free.
No, just thanks for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to just chat Bielsa and chat football in general. I mean, we're all locked down, aren't we? We don't get to see any other humans, so it's nice sometimes to just come online and chat to some new people about football and things we like and Bielsa. So yeah, really enjoyable, and thanks again.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Take care, mate.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye.
Very special thanks to our guest, Jamie at Newells_AN. Brought to you by Orta No Better and hosted by Shannon and Luke. Thanks as ever to @Emily Render for the use of her graphics, and to @Jen Jammin Sax for the use of her music.